I'm with Dr. Sarah Pears. We're just at the end of a fantastic conference, the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Conference. We're both panel members earlier on today. How was the day for you today?
Oh, it was excellent. I'm very pleased that I came along today. One of the wonderful things about a conference like this is that I get to speak to and hear from people coming to the issues of equality, diversity and inclusion from very different viewpoints. And I'm particularly interested in, obviously I'm here representing the Women's Engineering Society, so gender and engineering are my bag today, but I'm particularly interested, or I was very interested in hearing about all those other issues that women in STEM, women in engineering might come across. So for instance, women with disabilities or LGBT and other intersectionalities as well. So it was very good to be here.
It's been a long day. I know we've come to the end of it, but I just want to ask you to say a few words in terms of what the issues are, and again a little bit about your organisation and what's sort of hot on the agenda to a certain extent.
Okay, well, the Women's Engineering Society is obviously it's a membership society, obviously for women who are in engineering. Now there are many issues to deal with, but in particular one that is hot on the agenda is obviously around apprenticeships, because although women don't get as much access to engineering roles as men, particularly in the UK, it's even worse when you look at apprenticeships. So women in trade apprenticeships, women in engineering apprenticeships, there are so few of them. So part of my work today was really to try and explain what some of those issues might be and to raise awareness of this, because it is actually, I do, in my day job, I do a lot of work with FE colleges, and I have to say it's often they assume that a room full of young men in a trades apprenticeship provision or vocational STEM provision is fine. They don't actually look at it with a critical eye and go, well, why is it that 50% of the population aren't represented in that classroom? And employers are the same to some extent, particularly SMEs. So that was what I wanted to raise.
Sarah, you talked a lot about figures. You were again, you're very sort of data orientated. You're talking about the issues as well, but obviously again in terms of figures. Just share some of those figures, if from the top of your head. If I can just put you on the spot.
Absolutely, I can. My background is maths, so I tend to be very data oriented and number oriented. If we look at professional women in engineering, the figures are around 8%, 9% at the moment. However, the engineering workforce on the whole, it's about 6%. And the reason why it's lower there is because women in technical areas, in crafts, are even lower. It can be as low as 1%, 2% in construction apprenticeships, 4% or thereabouts in engineering apprenticeships. Now, apprenticeships are a big route into professional engineering now. They're also a big opportunity for people. That's where the skills gaps are, that's where the money is. So in terms of social mobility and equal opportunities for women, the fact that women are all doing hair and beauty, I mean, that's fine as a career. However, it's not a very well-paid career. There are very few jobs in hair and beauty compared to the number of jobs and vacancies that there are in construction and in engineering and digital technologies as well.
Sarah, you mentioned the business case for diversity. Would you mind sharing that with us as well?
Yes, I mean, this is quite well-known work by organisations like McKinsey and Dow Jones as well, looking at what happens when you have a diverse workforce and diverse leadership in organisations, in companies. And McKinsey's data shows that globally, if you have a diverse workforce and particularly diverse leadership, then those companies with higher diversity tend to do better financially, both in terms of gender, but even more so when it comes to BAME. Now, that's not to say that actually, women or BAME are so much better than white, grey, stale, middle-aged, middle-class men. It's probably more to do with both the fact that that organisation is much more open to innovation and creativity and to different ways of thinking, and hence that is why they've got a more diverse workforce, but also because diversity brings with it more creativity. This sort of slight friction of thinking differently. Creativity leads to innovation, and that leads to better business performance. So large companies get this message, SMEs don't get it. And we'd really like to see some of the large corporates actually making sure that their supply chain is actually part of the solution. So SMEs being part of the solution around diversity, because at the moment they really don't get it.
Okay. When I came here, I didn't think I was going to be thinking or learning about knitting. You were talking about knitting earlier on today. Just share that with us in terms of your story on knitting and the whole aspect of it.
That's an interesting one, because that's also a new one for me.
Yeah.
I was trying to make the point around what is known as organisational stupidity.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, we talked today a lot about unconscious bias, and unconscious bias is something that affects us individually.
Yeah.
However, organisations also suffer from biases that come through organisational processes that aren't quite fit for process. Yeah. Fit for purpose.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, for example, in recruitment, we often ask, particularly when it comes to apprentices and very young people, we try and tease out what hobbies they do.
Yeah.
Now, when you are from an an engineering background or technology background, you tend to ask things like, well, go on, tell us, do you tinker around in the garage?
Yeah.
Now, that's a sort of male pursuit, if I can put that sort of gender stereotype on it. That's not necessarily
you
true.
said women don't tinker around in garages.
No, young women are not encouraged to tinker around in garages. Yeah. Some do, obviously. Yeah. But so, and what we don't ask is things like, well, do you do knitting? Now, the reason why I raise that as an example is because when we know that one of the thinking skills that we'd like to see in people is logical thinking skills, problem solving, and technology, coding skills are very much in demand. When you look at a knitting pattern, and if you see somebody who can actually put together a knitting pattern, what they're doing is coding, essentially. It's all those skills. But do we recognise it? No, we don't.
That was a fantastic example. I won't be able to forget that. I'll probably sharing that with the with the kids and the missus back home when I get.
Try sewing. Try sewing. Sewing is a huge spatial thinking problem.
Yeah, so. Fantastic example. No really, thank you for your support.
Okay, thank you.
And really appreciate your time today as well.
No problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Think apprenticeship. Think pathway.